Szanowni Państwo,
Ladies and gentlemen,
odwiedza
if you come to visit the camp of Auschwitz-Birkenau, you have to pass next to a cargo wagon on the ramp. For most of you, it is just a cargo wagon, which was used to transport people into the camp. Well, I'd like to tell you the associations I have with this wagon. The first time I saw a train with such carriages back in 1942, when I was taking this train as I was going on holidays to my grandmother's, and I was passing through Treblinka. There were two trains there with a couple of carriages, and there were people on that train, either dead already or those who were waiting to die, because they were transporting people just to kill them there. So it was back in 1942 that I was taking this trip for holidays, and I saw these people. When I was going back from my holidays, I also saw those trains. And then in 1943, I was taking the same trip, passing through Treblinka, and I saw people on that trains. And only when I was going back from my holidays in 1943, I no longer saw the trains. It so turned out that Treblinka only continued to survive between July and August 1943, but back at that time, during that short period of time, some 9,000 Jews were killed. These were Jews coming from Poland, especially from Eastern Poland, but there were also Jews from Central and Eastern Europe who were transported there, and they simply had to wait on that ramp until there were vacancies for them to transport them into the camp. So when in 1944, after the Warsaw Uprising, from the transitional camp Dulag 1-1 in Pruszków, I was introduced into a carriage like that. It was so very clear for me that I was going to die, because I only knew these wagons as ways to take people to their death or kill them on the spot, because most of the people never survived to see a crematorium. They simply died on the train. So basically, when they were taking us on the train, because we were uploaded in Pruszków in the morning and we only arrived to Auschwitz in late evening, so when they opened up the carriages on the ramp, well, I first took this breath of relief, and I said, well, I'm not going to die on the train. So they opened the doors and they asked us out. When I left the carriage, with relief that I'm not going to die, I sensed the smell that I knew from Treblinka. This was the smell of burnt bodies. And so I was no longer joyful, because I knew I was going to meet the same end as those people who perished in Treblinka. So this was the feeling that accompanied me, and we were entered into this very building, where they cleaned our heads naked, and we were made political prisoners back then. When we left the sauna, well, I was a kid, so children aged between 3 and 14 were considered to be political prisoners. We were all allocated a red letter P standing for political prisoners, and a number. My number was 85595. And so we formed into a row of children taken away from their mothers, and we were brought into the children's block. Now, these were blocks made of mortar, and when they eliminated all the Romas, when they were all burned, we were transported into the gypsies camp, as they called it. It was a bit better, because, well, the barracks back there were heated, and the winter back in 1944-1945 was very severe, with temperatures falling below -25. And so in these wooden barracks, they had those ovens or burners that was passing through the barrack alongside, on the floor, on the ground rather, and we could actually sit on those heaters. They were warm, and we kept at least one body part warm back at that time. And this is how we survived until 1945, January. Today we are commemorating the anniversary of Auschwitz liberation. So the camp was liberated, but there were only 20% inmates left in the camp. Some 80% inmates were not liberated. I wasn't liberated, for instance, because on the night of the 18th of January, they gathered us as a roll call, and they took us out with the so-called Death March, where we had to walk from Oświęcim to Wodzisław Śląski, which is about 67 kilometers, in the freezing weather, minus 20 centigrades, and they took us to another stage, if you like. On that road between Auschwitz and Wodzisław Śląski, at every little village, you have collective graves of those who didn't make it, who never survived and who never made it to Wodzisław Śląski. But some of us survived. In Wodzisław Śląski, we were brought onto another means of transport, namely coal wagons. So they only had side walls. We were put on those coal wagons and transported to other camps. There was myself and a large group of other women. We were taken to Ravensbrück. Once we were taken to Ravensbrück, it turned out there was no place for us in the barracks, in the blocks, because there were so many people coming from Warsaw, and so they put up a tent for us for a few days. Again, remember, it was minus 20 centigrades, and we were thinking whatever's gonna become of us. And after a few days, they took us to sub-camps. I was transported to Neustadt Glewe, that is a sub-camp of Ravensbrück, and for me, the liberation only happened on the 2nd of May, a week before the war's over. So for me, the anniversary of liberation is the 2nd of May, and I'm also invited back to Germany on the 2nd of May to commemorate this event. But I was here in Auschwitz just a week before the official liberation. We were taken out to another sub-camp. So once the camp was liberated on the 2nd of May, there was still yet another journey that I had to take. See how many journeys and travels I had to take. So I had to travel back home. It took me 2 months because I had to walk back home. There were no means of transport available. They asked us to walk, and so from the end of May until, I guess, the beginning of August, I walked back home to be reunited with my family. So, to conclude, I'd like to read out Adam Asnik's poem coming back from the 19th century. It is a 19th century poem that is actually very vivid and very poignant right now. Something that happened in the 19th century did repeat itself in the 20th century, and it is also an important message in the 21st century. Pointless our mourning and your toil, helpless your cause is dire. Past forms no miracle can bring back from funeral pyre. One must go forward with the living, rich for new life, instead of placing a bunch of wasted laurel stubbornly on one's head. You shall not turn the tide of life, your anger keep at bay. Pointless your mourning and your toil, the world shall go its way. And it is my greatest wish for the young people and for the new generation not to be forced to take the troubles I had to take. Thank you very much.